The email arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing sentencing guidelines for a narcotics trafficking case in my chambers at the E. Barrett Prettyman United States Courthouse in Washington, D.C. I had been on the federal bench for 9 years. Before that, 7 years as an assistant United States attorney in the District of Columbia, prosecuting public corruption and financial fraud. My name was on the door. The plaque read, "The Honorable Nadia Owens, United States District Judge." I had earned every letter of that title. The email was from my father. His name is Gerald Owens. He retired 2 years ago from a career managing mid-level logistics contracts for a regional freight company outside Richmond, Virginia. He is 63 years old. He loves college football, hates morning traffic, and has never once in my adult life asked what I actually do for a living. The subject line read, "Saturday the DeSantis Foundation Gala. Please read first." I set down my pen. I opened it. Dad's email was 4 paragraphs long. The first paragraph explained that the DeSantis Foundation annual gala was being held Saturday evening at the Hay Adams Hotel on 16th Street. He and my mother had been invited by my brother Terrence, who had recently become engaged to a woman named Courtney Hale. The second paragraph described Courtney's family at length. Her father, Warren Hale, was a partner at Covington and Burling. Her mother sat on 2 nonprofit boards. The third paragraph was about Amanda Richardson. Amanda Richardson, Dad wrote, is a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. She is a close personal friend of the Hale family. She will be at the gala Saturday. She is very well connected and very serious, and we want to make a good impression on these people. Then came the fourth paragraph. Nadia, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I have to be honest with you. Amanda Richardson is the kind of person who asks a lot of questions. Courtney's family doesn't know much about your situation. The career stuff, the fact that you've been on your own for a while, the job transitions. I think it would just be easier if you sat this one out. Your brother agrees. We'll do a family dinner next month, just us. My situation. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time slowly. My situation was 9 years on the federal bench. My situation was clerking for a circuit court judge immediately after graduating from Georgetown Law in 1998. My situation was $187,000 in annual federal judicial salary, a pension, and a chamber's staff of 4. My situation was that I had presided over 2,400 cases, written opinions that had been cited by the 4th Circuit, the 7th Circuit, and once, by the United States Supreme Court. I opened a reply window. I typed, "Understood." I sent it. Then I went back to the sentencing guidelines and I finished my work. My clerk, Devon Park, knocked on my chamber's door at 4:45 that afternoon. He was 26 years old, 3 months into his clerkship, brilliant, and constitutionally incapable of hiding what he was thinking on his face. He had a manila folder in one hand and what I recognized as his "something happened" expression. "Judge Owens." He hesitated. "Your brother called the main line. He asked if you could call him back before 6. "I'll handle it." I took the folder from him. "What's next on the docket?" "Motion hearing at 9 Monday. Richardson versus Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation." I looked up. Richardson. Amanda Richardson. Assistant U.S. Attorney for the D.C. District. She's representing the government in a depositor fraud matter. He checked his notes. She's new to the case, replaced prior counsel 2 weeks ago. This will be her first appearance before you, Your Honor. I was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Devon." He nodded and left. I sat back in my chair. Outside my window, the October light was dropping over Pennsylvania Avenue. I thought about my father's email. I thought about the phrase "your situation." I thought about my brother Terrence, who had been copied on the email and had not responded with a single word. I thought about Amanda Richardson, Assistant United States Attorney, who would be appearing before me Monday morning in courtroom 14B. I did not call Terrence back. My courtroom clerk, Gail Montrose, had worked in courtroom 14B for 17 years. She had worked for 2 judges before me and had outlasted both of them. She knew every attorney who practiced regularly in the D.C. district, had strong opinions about most of them, expressed those opinions exclusively through a vocabulary of small gestures, a raised eyebrow, a particular silence, the angle at which she set a file on my desk, and was the most reliable institutional intelligence source in the building. Friday afternoon she appeared in my doorway with a stack of Monday's case files. He set them down. She paused. Richardson v. FDIC is the 9 o'clock, she said. I know. Ms. Richardson is new to it. She took over from Donnelly when he transferred to civil. Devon mentioned. Gail adjusted the stack of files half an inch. She's very good, she said carefully. One of the best in the DC office. I've watched her argue twice before Judge Abrams. She paused a second time. She grew up in Northwest DC. Family has been in this city a long time. I looked at her. Gail had an uncanny instinct for when something adjacent was happening. I did not know what she knew or suspected. What I knew was that she was giving me information she had not been asked for, which meant she had decided it was relevant, and Gail's judgments on relevance were rarely wrong. Thank you, Gail, I said. She nodded once. Turned to go. Has she appeared in front of me before? No, Your Honor. Monday will be her first time in this courtroom. All right. She left. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened the Richardson v. FDIC file and read every page of it. Not because I needed to, the matter was procedurally straightforward. But because I was a federal judge and this was Monday's work and the work was what I had. It was enough. Saturday came. I worked. I had 3 opinions to draft and a complex securities fraud matter that had produced 4,000 pages of pretrial motions. I ordered Thai food from a place on K Street. I watched the rain come in off the Potomac from my apartment window in Georgetown. I did not think very much about the Hay Adams Hotel. But I thought a little. I thought about my mother, Patricia, who had read the email before it was sent. I knew this because she always read his emails before he sent them and had said nothing. I thought about Terrence, who was 41 years old and worked in commercial real estate in Richmond and had never once, not once, asked how I was doing after my divorce in 2019. I thought about the phrase "the career stuff," which flattened 9 years of federal judicial service into something vague and slightly embarrassing. I poured a second glass of wine. I thought, they have genuinely no idea. And then, because I had known this for years and had simply chosen not to correct it, I thought, I let this happen. I had never lied to them. I had simply never explained. When my father asked what I did, I said I worked in law. When my mother asked if I liked it, I said yes. When Terrence asked if it paid well, I said it was fine. I had been quietly, carefully invisible inside my own family for the better part of a decade. That was a choice I had made. I had made it for reasons that once seemed logical: the distance, the politics of it, not wanting to perform my credentials at every holiday dinner. But standing at my kitchen window in the rain, I recognized it for what it had become. I had made it too easy for them not to see me. There had been a moment early on when I almost told my father everything. It was 2014, 2 weeks after the Senate confirmation. I was in Richmond for a weekend. He was watching a game. I sat down next to him on the couch and I said, "Dad, I want to tell you something that happened at work." He said, And then the play happened and he leaned forward and the moment passed and I let it pass and I never tried again in quite that direct way. That was on me. I knew it. Monday would not be my doing. I had not arranged it. I had not planned it. The court calendar was what it was, and Amanda Richardson had replaced prior counsel 2 weeks ago, and the world moves the way the world moves. But Monday was coming regardless. I went to bed at 11. I slept well. Monday morning, October 14th. I was in chambers by 7:15. Devon had the Richardson v. FDIC file tabbed and organized on my desk with a summary memo clipped to the front. The matter involved $3.2 million in alleged depositor fraud at a regional credit union in Northern Virginia. The FDIC was seeking disgorgement plus $890,000 in civil penalties. Amanda Richardson had taken over the government's position from a senior AUSA who had transferred to the civil division. It was a routine Monday motion hearing. Discovery disputes largely. It would take 90 minutes. At 8:50 I robed. My robe is black wool, well-fitted, cleaned and pressed. I have worn it for 9 years. I do not think about it any more than a surgeon thinks about scrubs. It is what I put on to do my job. Devon knocked at 8:58. "Court's ready, Your Honor." We walked the back corridor to the courtroom entrance. I could hear the murmur of voices through the door. Attorneys settling in, papers shuffling, the ambient sound of a courtroom before it begins. 18 people on a Monday morning. Defense counsel for the credit union, 3 associates, the FDIC's in-house counsel, and Amanda Richardson for the government. The door opened. Devon stepped through first. "All rise," said the marshal. "The United States District Court for the District of Columbia is now in session. The Honorable Nadia Owens presiding." I walked through the door. I heard it before I saw it, a sound very small from the government's table. A single sharp intake of breath. The kind you make when you've stepped off a curb you didn't see. I took my seat at the bench. I looked out at the courtroom. Amanda Richardson was standing at the government's table and she was not moving. She was holding a legal pad in her left hand and it had tilted slightly as though she had forgotten she was holding it. She was a tall woman in a dark navy suit with close-cropped hair and 20 years of federal prosecution behind her eyes. And right now those eyes were fixed on my face with an expression I could only describe as recalibration. She knew me. Not from the DeSantis Foundation Gala. Not from Courtney Hale's family. She knew me from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, where we had both been AUSAs simultaneously from 2001 to 2006, where we had worked on overlapping matters, where we had been, at various points, colleagues and occasionally competitors for the same assignments, and where she had been in the courtroom the day I received my federal judicial appointment in 2014 and had shaken my hand and said very quietly, "You were always going to end up here." She knew exactly who I was. She stood there for 3 full seconds. Then she put her legal pad down on the table, smoothed the front of her jacket with one hand, and looked directly at me with something in her expression that was equal parts professionalism, and I saw it clearly, something like dawning realization. Not about me. About the context she had walked into. I waited. She found her voice first. "Your Honor." Her tone was careful. Steady. The voice of someone who had spent 20 years addressing federal judges and knew exactly how to do it. "Good morning. Amanda Richardson, Assistant United States Attorney, appearing on behalf of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation." "Good morning, Ms. Richardson." My voice was the voice I had used for 9 years in this room. Measured. Clear. No performance in it. "Are all parties ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let's begin." The hearing ran 94 minutes. Amanda Richardson was exceptional. She had had the file for 2 weeks and had mastered it completely. Her arguments on the discovery disputes were precise, well-sourced, and efficient. She did not stumble. She did not over-argue. When I pushed back on one of her positions regarding the scope of document production, she conceded the point cleanly and moved on. She was exactly the attorney I remembered from 15 years ago, except sharper. There were 18 people in the courtroom. Defense counsel for the credit union, a senior partner from Williams & Connolly named David Park, flanked by 3 associates. The FDIC's in-house liaison, a quiet man named Garrett who said almost nothing. Amanda at the government's table, her junior associate beside her, a woman with a yellow legal pad and fast handwriting. At the 40-minute mark, I addressed Amanda directly. "Ms. Richardson, the government's position on the document production timeline, you're asking for 30 days. Defense is asking for 60. Walk me through your timeline calculation." She stood without hesitation. No shuffling of papers. No checking notes. She had it ready. "Your Honor, the relevant documents fall into 3 categories. Internal communications which have already been identified in the privilege log, 14 days to produce. Financial transaction records, which the credit union's own compliance office has already compiled an additional 10 days to organize for production format. And the board minutes, which are the only genuinely time-intensive set. We believe 6 days is sufficient given the credit union's staff of 2 available paralegals." 30 days total, I said. 30 days total, Your Honor. And we're prepared to produce categories 1 and 2 on an accelerated schedule if the court requires it. David Park stood. "Your Honor, our concern is completeness, not speed, Mr. Park." I held up a hand. "I'll hear you on the board minutes." He made his argument. It was competent. Amanda had the better position. I ruled 30 days on the document production with a 14-day interim deadline for the financial records. I ruled in her favor on 3 of the 4 discovery disputes. The 4th I took under advisement. When I called the hearing concluded, the courtroom stood. She was still standing at the government's table when most of the other attorneys had begun filtering out. Her junior associate was packing files. She had her legal pad in her hand again. She was looking at the floor. I had already risen to exit when I heard her speak quietly, not to me, to no one in particular, More like something escaping than something said. "Oh, Gerald," she said. Almost a whisper. "You genuinely have no idea." I did not react. I walked through the door. Devon fell into step beside me in the back corridor. He said nothing for 11 steps. Then, "Judge Owens. Was there something, did you know that attorney?" "In passing," I said. "A long time ago." He nodded. He had the good instinct not to ask more. We walked back to chambers. I took off my robe. I hung it on the hook behind the door, the same hook it had hung on for 9 years. I sat at my desk. Gail appeared in the doorway at 11:45. She set a mug of coffee on my desk without being asked. "Strong hearing," she said. "Ms. Richardson was well prepared." "Yes." Gail paused. She seemed surprised. "By the courtroom. First time in front of me." Another pause. The kind Gail used when she had filed something away and closed the drawer. "Your 1 o'clock is ready when you are. Give me 5 minutes." She left. I drank the coffee. I looked at the plaque on my desk. The Honorable Nadia Owens, United States District Judge. 9 years of it. Burnished at the corners. Solid as the desk it sat on. I thought about my father's email. I thought about the Frazier situation. Then I picked up the file for my 1 o'clock and I went back to work. The call came at 6:17 that evening. It was not from my father. It was from Terrence. He said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay." Were you aware that Amanda Richardson was going to be in your courtroom today?" "It was on the docket." Long pause. "Nadia." His voice had something in it I had not heard in a long time. Something that sounded like he was choosing his words very carefully from a very small pile. "She told Courtney. About you. About your position. About all of it. She said she'd appeared in front of you that morning. She said," he stopped. Started again. "She said she was sorry she hadn't recognized the name on the case documents. She said she didn't make the connection between Nadia Owens and Dad's daughter." I waited. "Courtney told her parents," Terrence said. "Warren Hale called Dad about an hour ago." Another pause. "Nadia. Dad he's not doing well with this." "How do you mean?" "I mean he called me asking if it was true. If you'd been a federal judge this whole time." And I had to tell him yes. And he said," Terrence's voice shifted. It cracked slightly on the edge of something. He said, "Why didn't she tell us?" And I didn't have an answer for him because I don't have an answer for him. I was quiet for a moment. "The question you're asking me," I said, "is why I never corrected the picture you all had of my life." "Yes." The honest answer is that I tried once or twice early on. After the appointment. I mentioned it at Thanksgiving in 2015. Mom changed the subject. "You asked about the football game." Dad said that was nice and then talked about a highway project near Richmond for 20 minutes. I paused. I decided it wasn't worth the effort of making it land. And then I stopped trying. Terrence was quiet for a long time. "That's not we weren't trying to dismiss you." "I know," I said. And I did know. That was the part that was hard to be angry about. They hadn't dismissed me out of cruelty. They had dismissed me out of complete, uncomplicated, thoroughgoing disinterest. They had never asked a follow-up question. They had never wanted to know what I did when I wasn't at the holiday table. "Nadia, Dad's email, was not the first time," I said. "It was just the most explicit. He used the phrase 'my situation' 3 times in 4 paragraphs. Terrence didn't answer that. "Amanda Richardson is a very serious federal prosecutor," I said. "She has 20 years of experience. She appeared in my courtroom today and was outstanding. And Dad's concern was that she might ask questions about my quote-unquote situation. Because in his model of my life, I am an embarrassment to be managed, not a colleague of the very person he was trying to impress." The silence went on long enough that I could hear Terrence exhale. "I don't know what to say to you." "You don't need to say anything tonight," I said. "This isn't a conversation I want to have at 6:30 on a Monday. Will you talk to Dad?" "When I'm ready," I said. "Not yet." I ended the call. I stood at the window for a while. The thing about invisibility is that you can mistake it for peace. For a long time I had. I had told myself that the quiet, the not explaining, the accepting of my father's flat, incurious nods when I mentioned work. I had told myself all of that was fine. That I didn't need the acknowledgement. that I was above the wanting of it. I had been a federal judge for 9 years, and federal judges are not supposed to need their fathers to understand their job titles. But there is a difference between not needing something and not minding that you don't have it. I had confused those two things for a very long time. I poured a glass of water. I drank it standing at the counter. Then I went to my desk and wrote 2 paragraphs on the Carver-Hollis supplemental opinion I had been revising for a week. They were good paragraphs. I read them back. They held. I went to bed at 10:15. I slept. My father called Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. I was in chambers. I did not answer. He called again Tuesday evening. I let it go to voicemail. His voicemail was 2 minutes and 43 seconds long. I listened to it once. He said he had been shocked. He said he had not known. He said he was proud of me, which was a word I had not heard from him in that context in more than a decade. He said he was sorry about the email. He said, "Your situation again," this time in quotation marks, and said he knew now that had been the wrong phrase. He said, "I don't understand why you wouldn't tell us." I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I drafted a response in my head, not as a letter, just as something I needed to articulate before I could put it somewhere and leave it there. I thought, you stopped asking. You stopped being curious about who I was. I didn't hide, I just stopped explaining because explaining required you to be interested and you weren't. Not out of malice. Out of the simple, exhausting fact that you had a version of me in your head and you had stopped updating it sometime around 1999. And everything after that, the clerkship, the AUSA years, the appointment, the 9 years on the bench, it was all happening in a room you had forgotten was there. I didn't send that. What I did 4 days later was call my father back. I told him I was glad he now had an accurate picture. I told him the email had hurt not because it surprised me but because it was clear and in writing, and it confirmed something I had been managing around for years. I told him I was not going to perform an explanation for my entire career. That information had been available, that I had offered it, and that it had not been received. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Nadia. I think we made you feel like you had to be invisible." That sentence surprised me. "Yes," I said. "That's what happened." He asked if we could start over. I said, "I'm not interested in starting over. I'm interested in going forward. Those are different things." He said he understood. I don't know yet if he does. But he said it and I wrote it down and I will hold it at a careful distance and see what it grows into. 2 weeks after the Monday hearing, Amanda Richardson filed a supplemental brief that referenced a district court opinion I had written in 2019, United States v. Carver-Hollis, a financial fraud case out of Northern Virginia, citing my analysis of wire fraud jurisdictional standards. She cited it correctly. She cited it well. I noticed. I said nothing about it. But I noticed. 3 weeks after the hearing, I received an invitation to speak at the D.C. Bar Association's annual Federal Judiciary Symposium. The invitation had come through the administrative office of the courts, which was normal. What was not normal was the handwritten note attached to it, on U.S. Attorney's Office letterhead that read, "Your Honor, I've taken the liberty of recommending you for the keynote. You were always the most rigorous voice in the room. A. Richardson." I set the note on the corner of my desk. I looked at it for a while. Then I picked up my pen and went back to work. Warren Hale, Courtney's father, sent a formal note to my chambers 3 weeks after the hearing. It was handwritten on Covington and Burling stationery, and it expressed, with considerable elegance, both his admiration for my judicial record and his regret that the family had been introduced to it under such circumstances. He mentioned that his firm regularly had matters before the district court. He mentioned nothing about his future son-in-law's family email. My courtroom clerk, Gail, who had worked in courtroom 14B for 17 years and had seen everything, handed me the note with a completely neutral expression that I had learned to read as restrained amusement. "Should I log this, Your Honor?" "Log it as general correspondence," I said. "Yes, Your Honor." He turned to go. "Gail." She stopped. "Does anything ever surprise you in this building?" She considered the question for exactly 2 seconds. "Less and less," she said, and walked out. I did not go to the family dinner Terrence organized in November. Not because I refused, because I had a sentencing hearing that could not be continued, and I was honest about that when I declined. My mother called me the week after. She did not ask about the hearing. She asked how I was sleeping. She asked if I was eating well. She asked quietly if I had been lonely. I had not expected that question. "Sometimes," I said. I didn't know, she said. About any of it. The appointment, she stopped. I should have asked more. I knew you were busy and I didn't want to bother you. But I think I was also I didn't know how to ask about a life that was so different from what I understood. That was honest. Cost her something to say it. I'm not angry with you, Mom, I said. And I was not. I was tired and I was clear-eyed and in some way I was still working out, relieved. Not because anything had been fixed, but because the hiding was over. Not because I had chosen to end it, but because the world had ended it for me on a Monday morning in courtroom 14B. And now the distance between who I was and who they thought I was had collapsed and there was no managing it anymore. That was its own kind of freedom. A month after the hearing, I attended the DC Bar Association Symposium. I gave the keynote. 47 federal judges, 60+ attorneys, 3 law school deans. I spoke for 22 minutes on the evolution of wire fraud statute interpretation in the DC Circuit. It was not a performance. It was work. Amanda Richardson was in the third row. After the applause, during the reception, she made her way across the room to me with a glass of white wine and the direct eye contact of someone who has something to say and intends to say it. Your Honor. She extended her hand. I shook it. You were always going to end up in that chair, she said. It was the same thing she had said in 2014 and she said it the same way, not as flattery as a simple observation. You mentioned that once before, I said. I meant it then. I mean it now. She paused. I'm sorry about the Monday hearing. I should have made the connection. Your name was on every document and you had been on the case 2 weeks, I said. And you were excellent. She was quiet a moment. Then, I didn't tell Courtney to cause any disruption. I know, I said. I'm aware you didn't. She looked at me with the careful, measuring look I remembered from the AUSA years, when she was deciding whether to trust someone with something real. Are you all right? She asked. It was the simplest question anyone had asked me in months. Yes, I said. I think I'm more all right than I've been in a while. She nodded. Lifted her glass. To cases well argued. To cases well argued, I said. We parted. The room moved around us. Outside the windows of the Ronald Reagan building, the lights of Pennsylvania Avenue stretched all the way to the Capitol. I stood there for a moment and felt, quietly and with considerable clarity, like myself. My father came to Washington in December. He asked to see my chambers. I said yes. He arrived on a Tuesday morning, December 3rd at 9 o'clock, in a pressed shirt and the good coat he saves for significant occasions. Devin showed him in. My father stood in the doorway of my chambers and looked at the bookshelf of U.S. reports, the framed commission on the wall, the plaque on my desk and the view down to the street below. He stood there for a long time. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, It's a nice office. Thank you. The plaque. He pointed at it. Not reading it aloud. Just pointing. 9 years. 9 years. He nodded slowly. He put his hands in his pockets. I didn't ask enough, he said. No, I said. You didn't. He looked at me. I'd like to, he said. Ask more. If that's still available. I looked at my father. 63 years old. Good coat. Hands in his pockets. Standing in my doorway like a man who has driven 2 hours from Richmond to say something he should have said in 2014 or 2010 or 1998, and is finally, imperfectly, saying it. It's still available, I said. He sat down across from my desk. I poured us both a cup of coffee. Devin quietly closed the door behind him. I don't need my family to understand what I do. Not anymore. I spent too many years wanting them to see me and accepting invisibility as the price of keeping the peace. That was a cost I should have stopped paying a long time ago. But here is what I know now. The hiding was not protecting anything. It was not keeping the peace. It was keeping a gap between who they thought I was and who I actually was, and I had maintained that gap because it felt easier than the alternative. And the alternative finally arrived on a Monday morning without my permission and collapsed the whole thing in 4 seconds flat. I am not free because my family apologized. I am not free because Amanda Richardson told the truth. I am not free because Warren Hale sent a note on good stationery or because my father came to Washington in his good coat. I am free because the gap is gone. I am free because I am no longer managing the distance between the two versions of myself. I am free because, on a Tuesday morning in December, my father sat across from my desk and asked me, for the first time in a long time, what I was working on. And I told him, if you've ever had to set limits with family, you are not alone in this. Type invisible in the comments if you've ever been the person in the room that your own family didn't really see. We're out here, all of us, building lives that are worth seeing whether or not the right people are looking. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're listening from. And share this with someone who needs to hear it today.